I came to this in a very slow process. I'm half Jewish by my father's side. My grandparents escaped Hitler. I think my grandmother was tattooed, and she may have lost 5 siblings, maybe sisters. I don't know for sure. And I read an article called The 5 Sexes by Anne Fausto Sterling. And I was like, oh, okay, male, female, and everything in between, right? So there's a lot of people that are intersex. And they grow up having been cut for the comfort of the doctor and the parents that are anxious. How are we going to raise the child, boy, girl? Well, you can't just assign a child a gender by slapping a dress and pants on it or whatever. And, you know, these kids grow up with modified genitals and they don't work. And everybody knows that sexual pleasure matters. And if your sexual organs don't work right, it's depressive and they can end up committing suicide. You know, so that moved me, and I thought, well, if my kid's completely intersex, I would not do anything to them to change them, and they would get to choose. So I was like, circumcision is barbaric. But I never really dug out the Jewish aspect, like what does circumcision do? You know, you just don't look there. As a man, you don't want to know. And, you know, so I had my kids, and they had circumcision prep, $300. I'm like, what the hell is that shit? I'm not paying, I didn't want that, and we're not paying for it, take it off the bill. Which they did. And our delivery doctor was great because she had small hands. She was a lesbian in our church and we were really close. And she stayed out of the picture until like my first child was definitely crowning. And I'm like, oh my God, there's a boy in there coming out. You know, so I was holding him in and the doctor heard her moan. She goes, oh, that's a baby. And she got out of her nap and came in and 5 minutes later he was born. So that's the way it should work. Like less intervention, everything worked. My mother-in-law showed up about 20 minutes before delivery, which was a big stressor for me. And my wife as well. But it was like 3 in the morning and she drove all night from this is not what the mother needs. You don't really have to be there. It's not theater.
Yeah,
right?
No.
And my wife lost a ton of blood. And so her blood pressure was like 55 over whatever. And I had a lot of blood pressure. I'm like, how low can that go when you're still alive? Who knows? And 6 years later, my brother said to me, and this is like the perfect introduction to circumcision and intactivism. He said, you should retract and clean. Your boy could get phimosis. Oh. And I thought, what is that? So I Googled it, and 30 minutes later, I knew more than my brother and 90% of the doctors in America.
Yes.
Right? And this is 8 years back.
Yeah.
So I wrote my brother a nice, firm letter and said, you're full of shit, and you're a doctor, you're new.
Humorous.
But you don't know something. And my brother's like, well, I don't know about that. You know, and he's a very reasonable guy. He's a middle child. I was the fighter. So I was the first child. I fought everything. So I made it easy for him, right? And we locked antlers on this for years. But even now, he circed both of his boys himself, because he's a doctor. He thought it would honor his grandmother. I'm like, go visit her grave, for God's sake. So, and he still thinks of that as, he wouldn't change his mind. And we locked antlers over that. But even that's not far enough. So now you know that it's damaging. But you find out as you turn the pages on Google or Wikipedia, you find out this is really damaging. And when your hands have more feeling inside your partner than your penis does, something's wrong, right? So then you find out about impotence and restoration and all this stuff. And you just uncover it and uncover it and uncover it. So that was my path through all of this. But even then, I was like, it's still a parent's decision. It can be private. Everybody gets to choose. And I could try and convince people, but I won't push hard. I'll just let them know it matters. And then I saw an essay, which for me was transformative. And this essay is called, Why Jewish Penis is Better Than Christian Penis. Oh. And it's a 600-year-old essay from Rabbi Yedaya, who was a disciple of Maimonides. Everybody's heard of Maimonides. It gets quoted often. Yedaya is less well-known, recently translated. And he said, if a man makes love to a woman all night long, and he gets up to leave, she grabs him by the loins and says, come on back, because of the pleasure that his foreskin gives her, because he doesn't ejaculate, and he can last as long as he wants. And she is satisfied by him time and time again, and he stays there and really bonds to her and loves her deeply, and it's hard for her to separate from him. But the circumcised man, on the other hand, he inserts his crown and immediately comes and rolls over and falls asleep. And she's left unsatisfied a year at a time. and never has an orgasm, but she's pregnant with his seed, and then his heart doesn't fall into his groin, and he doesn't love his wife. He thinks about God, and his heart goes up into his head, and he can read the Torah and be a happy guy, because that's what we want. We don't want them to be bonded to each other, and this is why we do this. And I thought, those bastards knew about this 600 years ago, and now we're all circumcised, Jews, Americans. Nobody knows shit anymore, and here it is. So I'm like, these people, my ancestors, half Jewish, lied about this stuff back then, and they're still lying about it now. There's one thing I can't stand. It's a bullshitter and a liar.
Yes.
So I was like,
Amen.
I'm going to
Amen.
start working on this, and I got the sign, and I got the shirt, and now my family's really tired of me. It's like,
You're not the only one.
but it's a step by step, and people that aren't interested in this, they don't have any idea how reluctant men especially are to dig into this. It's so hard. You don't even want to go there, and they have like no respect for your feelings, you know, and no respect for the story, because they're like, I thought about it, it's fine, see you later. You know, it's all superficial for them.
Yeah.
And I think of this as a very deep emotional wound that men hold up, oh, medicine, health, cleanliness, because they don't want to know. They don't want to pretend that they were assaulted and raped. And I didn't start out with that word, but it took me 3 years, and I finally got there. It's rape. Mm-hmm. I didn't like that either, but it's rape. Mm-hmm. You know, so we have half the population in this country is raped, and we're a very violent country. Yeah. What does that tell you? So that's my story. It's a deep wound, and people will hide behind any fact they can to not look at themselves and look at their culture. But I can't convince them of that initially. Sometimes I'll go with any tool I can get to get them to think about it more than 20 seconds. And if you get them a little bit, you know, you got to stretch that out. But if you say, it's got to be this, and you don't know this, and you got to use every tool you got.